Welcome everyone. We're gonna give it till about 3 after or so. This is Tilden Kim here on your left hand side on your screen, and I'm on your right. This is my wife Shelly and our cat Toonses when he got all dressed up for a formal.
And then I'm in the 37th floor of our high-rise in downtown LA. And so I have a picture of Ansel Adams in the background where I'd much rather be than right now. But, hanging out here with everyone, with all the Craigers, with all this great wine and company that we're going to have, it's a great consolation. All right. So Lori Humble says, ready for wine on this beautiful evening. Hi, Lori. This is Tilden.
Hi, Lori. Elton here. Welcome aboard. This is great.
So Sean Vogler says hello. Hi, Sean. We have a question coming in from Connor, and we'll get to your question later once everyone is on and we get this process started. And Christian loves your background, both the Shelly and the cat and the wine.
Yeah, my whole family. My whole family.
I'll skip out here in a few.
No, you got to say hi to everybody when they come on. I hope everybody out there has a little Robert Craig Zinfandel under the Q&A. If you can tell me what kind of Riedel glass this is, right here. Get extra credit. You might win something by the end of the night.
And then I'm going to butcher this person's name. I can't pronounce it. Kadzolika is asking what is being poured first, and we're going to first pour and sample the Zinfandel from Black Sears.
Correct.
Richard Miyake says howdy. Hey, Richard.
Hi, Richard.
John Fowler says hello, Elton.
John Fowler. Hey, John. Welcome aboard. I hope you're well. How great it is to hear you, to see that you've come on.
And hello back, Sean Vogler. Wine Falcon.
Wine Falcon is aboard. I hope you're filming this, Sean, from inside that Hellcat so you can rev it up every once in a while when you have your first sip of these.
Jason Guerrero says, what's up, bro? Loving the Craig.
Hey, Kansas City in the house.
And then Bob Linder would like you to talk about the 2016 cab if you have time. So hopefully we can get to it.
Yeah.
You know, Bob, I rarely do much talking about Cabernet, but I can make an exception this one time.
And then Manny says, Manny and the rest of the crew are on, and say hello.
Miami in the house.
Sarah and Mitch, that's quite a water glass. Yeah.
Hey, Sarah Mitch, all right. Hey, that's not a water glass, man. That is a Riedel. This is a Riedel. It has a short stem. It's one of my favorite because it fits in the dishwasher.
And then, hey, beer man, Joe. Joe says,
Joe, and Whale Smoke is coming on.
I know I'm going to butcher this name as well. So Johnny Tamino?
Oh, yeah. Hey, Johnny, welcome in.
Steve and Laura McCullough from Oklahoma. They're really excited.
Oklahoma.
Big Craigers.
Yeah.
Let's see. Dan Allred says, hey, Elton.
Oh.
Dan, all right. Dan's the guy that I owe the 15 million bucks to, Silicon Valley Bank.
As does
Dan, I'll pay you in 3 months. Don't worry about it. The mortgage is coming.
As well as Jeff Stevenson says hello.
All right, Jeff. Now there's a man that can dial you up and sell you some wine.
Wow, and JB's really thinking ahead. He wants to try the 19s. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Our buddy Rich Hanna from Gino Vino, he bought the 3-pack and he says hello.
All right, Rich, thanks so much.
And of course, Richard Miyake says hello to everyone.
Richard's nothing but trouble, but he somehow got into this. I should have had a better security code.
And then let's see, Rick Brennan says hello from Virginia, VA.
Rick, oh my goodness. I wish we were up on Howe Mountain today, but like I said, nobody's going to have to drive home after this.
And Chris and Catherine from NC, North Carolina, I assume, saying hello.
Hey, Damas. is in the house, the Den of Lions.
And then let's see, James Alvarez, says hello, Elton.
Hey, James. Oh my goodness, what a great group. Thanks, everybody. So on a note, like, unfortunately, I'm not able to respond to raised hands or to chats or the chat on this. So apologies. You just have to go to Q&A, and then Tilden is going to be moderating. Let me introduce you to my lovely shelter-in-place mate. This is our family. Shelly Smith, our cat Toonses. When he was off the prom, he was dressed up in his white tie and tails. And then to my left, we have Tilden Kim. I'm Elton. Welcome, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
All right. I sent you a link, babe, so you can watch on your
Okay.
iPad. All right. Well, this has been a very exciting and gosh, fraught with tension time. So all I have is my computer camera and audio, which I understand is pretty good out there because the entire world is sold out of webcams and out of microphones right now. So nothing has come the Amazon way. But let me start with, first of all, just saying to everybody that is on board, we have, I think, about 150 participants here. Thank you so much from all of us at Robert Craig Winery. You know, it's been a really, really tough time since we sell about 55% of our entire 9,000 case production. So we sell about 5,000 cases of our 9,000 cases to restaurants, which are currently not doing business, and goodness knows when they are going to get back on. So for all the people that took time to support our winery and the wine club release and through the years, and all of my, people from everywhere from Oklahoma to Miami to New York to Virginia to right here in California. First of all, from Shelly and me and Toonses, my son, I would just like to say thank you for coming to join us. And I wanted to do something where, we took the price down pretty much close to cost on this in order to get people to come in and enjoy some wine and take a moment off from this COVID nightmare we're all in. But it certainly made Shelly and I a closer couple of partners, that's for sure. And so we're going to have a great tasting tonight, but I am remiss. Let me introduce Tilden Kim here. He's on the left-hand side of your screen, and better known as, well, maybe not better known. He's a somewhat famous attorney in Southern California and Los Angeles, but Tilden and I met about 6 years ago. We met through social media, but Tilden, why don't you tell them how you got into wine and Robert Craig?
Sure. So yes, I am Tilden Kim, and people are wondering, why is this guy a special guest? And I think I have several good ideas. Number one, I am a lawyer, as Elton mentioned, and I think Elton figured I'd be good at questioning Elton, like in a deposition, but
not like a deposition, Tilden. Relax. Remember that.
Absolutely, it's hard for me to relax unless I have a bottle of Craig, right?
That's right.
But my history with Robert Craig goes a lot farther than just meeting Elton 6 years ago through social media. And I've told this story to Elton, several times. When I went up to college up in UC Davis many decades ago, there was a woman in the dormitory, and she came from Napa, and we were all drinking cheap beer, and she brings these amazing wines, and she brought some Joseph Phelps and others, but I distinctly also remember Robert Craig. And I started college as a chemistry major, and because of the love of wine, I went into viticulture enology and studied viticulture enology for several years, but then realized that I probably couldn't make a good living at it, and the chances of me succeeding in winemaking, are probably about the same chances of being a rock star, and so that's why I went into law. But so it's great and an honor to share the stage with a rock star, as Elton is. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to moderate this. Thank you.
Tilden, man, I just appreciate you taking time out. So Tilden and I think Tilden has been involved in over the last 5 years. I think he's been involved in both times in that entire time period that I slept in my shoes in a hotel room after being dropped off by an Uber. But I've had some of the most memorable wine nights of my life with you, Tilden, and the crew down there. So LA Wine Crew, all welcome. And you know, I apologize for, I see we still have some people joining. I want to say I'm ignoring chat and I'm ignoring raised hands. We're just going with the Q&A. I couldn't figure out how to disable it on Zoom, but Tilden will field the questions and then hopefully we'll get to everybody's questions live. But welcome again. And I'm sorry we had so much response to this that we were not able to do a meeting with close to 200 people on board. There's just no way for us all to be shouting at one another on the screen. So Tilden's gonna moderate, take your questions, and I'm gonna roll through and we're gonna talk about the 2015 vintage. You know, one of the questions that Tilden asked me tonight was, Elton, why are you doing 2015s and why are you doing Howell Mountain? And the answer to that question is that I think, you know, as a guy that's loved wine for many years, I got my start in distribution in 1989. And before that, you know, waiting tables was my introduction to great wine at Indiana University. And, you know, all of these years, I've discovered through 30 plus years in the wine business, that the press, they always love these ripe years. You know, I think about 84, 1987, if you recall, those years were super ripe. And it's interesting, in that decade, I preferred the 85 and 86 wines. And it's really weird, but 94 and 97 were both big press years, humongous scores. Our wines included, got giant scores in those years, all spectator selection and seller selection, and 96 points on almost everything from Parker, including affinity. But I prefer our 95 and 96 wines. And then 06 and 07, same deal, you know, or 2007, 2004 rather, where you have these big ripe years that the press just loves the ripe years. You know, when the wines are young, they're showing that huge color and fruit and are so sweet, but that color always comes and that ripeness always comes at the expense of structure. It's the yin and yang of the wine business. And so to me, in the 2000s, I have preferred, you know, 2005 and 2006, maybe my favorite Napa Valley vintage for many, many years, to those other, to the other vintages, the riper years of 04 and 07 that got all the press. And here we are again. I mean, it's I think 2014, big ripe year, 2016, a ripe year, though a ripe year with structure. I mean, 2016 is pretty much a perfect vintage. But 2015, these wines are wound. And I think about it like 88 versus 89 Bordeaux, where you know, 89 Bordeaux received all the acclaim because it was such a humongous year, very warm year in Bordeaux. And 88 was kind of such a classic vintage, but it was left to its wayside. So all of these wines from Galoni received a couple points lower than the 2014 wines, which 14 is an excellent vintage. But I feel that the 15s are far superior to the 14s and the 12s. And so, you know, we kept the library of these back because of the fact that I think these wines are going to be tremendous in the future, and they're just now showing up. And the very best expression of vintage, because of the shy yields, is on Howell Mountain. And that's why I chose Howell Mountain. That's why I chose the 15 vintage. So we're going to start with Zinfandel. We're going to go to Merlot, and we're going to go to Cabernet Sauvignon from the vineyards. And I believe you've had all of these, right, Tilden, with me, you know?
Actually, I haven't, but and so it'll be a pleasure to you know, taste them with you and share our assessments with everyone else. But before we get to the wines, you know, one of the funniest things I've heard from you, and I've heard many funny anecdotes from you, is you wouldn't eat off the floor, so why would you drink wine from the valley floor? Did you make that up, and why do you say that?
I haven't trademarked yet that, Tilden. That's my T-shirt coming out that only the clubbers will get the first choice on. The front side will say, you know, would you eat off the floor? And then the back side says, then why drink off the floor? Mountain Cabernet, since 30 years of mountain Cabernet from the summit of Howell Mountain, Robert Craig Winery. Because for me, Valley Floor wines, let's face the facts, they don't have the stress, they don't produce the structure, they don't have the class, the longevity, the expression of terroir, as like your Instagram handle, Terroir Matters. To me, once you get hooked on mountain wines, the wines from Diamond and Veeder and Spring Mountain and Atlas Peak and Pritchard Hill, it's really hard for me to go and drink some big, juicy, fat bombs down on the valley floor. So everything we do is mountain and hillside. Affinity is the lowest elevation wine at 400 feet. But for everybody that's been to Bob and Lynn's old house, which is now, I'm quietly turning into a crack house on that vineyard property because it's just the vineyard that I take care of now. But, even that is a steep, rocky hillside.
Well, and then, Eldon, when I was doing some research, I didn't realize that Howell Mountain was the first mountainous AVA in Napa Valley in 1983. And
That's correct, the first nested AVA.
yeah, can you give us some history background as to how it got to be the first mountain AVA?
Well, it was Mike Beatty and Randy Dunn and some others got together and looked at where the inversion layer was in the Napa Valley. It started at 1,400 feet. And that is where the fog line would sit on the Howell Mountain. So they said, okay, we're going to make Howell Mountain is going to be everything that's above 1,400 feet, or else you can't put it on the label. So all of the other mountain AVAs, Howell Mountain looks pretty big when you look at it on a map, but it's just this thin disc along the summit from 1,400 feet up to where our vineyard is, where we're on the summit is 2,400 feet. Those are the only places you can call Howell Mountain. So if you're, Rick Foreman, you can't put Howell Mountain on the label. If you're, what's Jason's last name from 100 Acre? But Jason can't put Howell Mountain on his wines. There are many people, Viader, that make great wine that certainly tastes like Howell Mountain, but only above 1,400 feet. And that's what's special about the AVA. So as you go up in altitude on the summit of the mountain where we are, we average 12 degrees cooler every day than on the valley floor. So in the summertime, if you turn off Silverado Trail and it's 100 degrees there, right by Markham Winery before you get to Duckhorn and head up, it's going to be 88 degrees up on Howell Mountain. So you have this very nice long ripening curve. We're about 3 weeks behind valley floor in harvest. The yields are much lower. Valley floor yield average is 5.5 tons, and Howell Mountain over the last 10 years has been 1.8 tons on our 2 vineyards, which is exceedingly low. So you get this absolute, coming together of these different traits that make this great wine. You get big tannin development, but because you get this slow, long ripening, the tannins are lush and round. So tremendous longevity, but also a great silkiness on the palate.
So the late, Robert Craig, he knew what he was doing, right? Because he bought the property up in Howell Mountain before the AVA designation, right?
Yes. So, well, it was actually Bob bought the property after the AVA.
Okay.
Bob was working for Hess Collection and helped develop the Mount Veeder and Spring Mountain. He spearheaded the development of those AVAs, but Bob did know what he was doing because he was friends with Dennis Johns, who started White Cottage Ranch after his time. He was able to receive that ranch when Suntory Brewing, I believe, was the one that owned St. Clement Winery, and they sort of ended up giving him that property. So it's kind of a fascinating story. If you ever get Dennis too many cocktails in it, he'll tell you all about it. But he got a steal on White Cottage Ranch that is now, I believe it's Adamus, but I can't remember what the hell that place is now.
Okay.
So
Before we go further, I just want to remind people again, thank you so much for all the comments that are coming in. And I've got literally over 100 of them, and so there's no way I can answer all of them, but please, thank you so much. Keep them coming. And as a good entree to tasting the first wine, I have a question from Rick, that he loves the Black Sears Zin, and when's the optimal drinking window for drinking it? I think, optimal is right now, right? So Elton, maybe
if you see my face, Rick, If you see my face, that means it's time to drink some Black Sears Zinfandel out of your cellar. That's a great question. So with that, let's move to Black Sears Vineyard. Our first vintage with these guys. I'll show you a picture. This is our next door neighbor up on Howell Mountain. I don't know if everybody can see that or not, but you can see those old gnarly vines. It's farmed by Pete Richmond, who now farms our Howell Mountain properties. He's maybe the most expensive farmer, one of them in the Napa Valley, along with David Abreu and Josh Clark, but it's worth the money. So I'm looking forward to seeing what our produce is like this year if we make it through it. Zinfandel, I would never mess with it. Let's face facts. I'm like, the last thing I need is another wine we're making up on Howell Mountain. But at this point, everybody, make sure you have that glasses in. And I hope somebody can tell me who makes this, what Riedel glass this is.
And Black Sears, and I was doing research on Black Sears as well, because I always wondered, does it have any relationship to, the department store? And it's the contraction or the combination of the two last names of the husband and wife
That's right, Joyce Black and Jerry Sears. And Jerry was smart enough to put her name first on the label. So, and unfortunately we lost Jerry last September, right around the same time that Bob Craig passed away. And just one of the greatest guys in the wine business. But this vineyard is farmed completely organic, biodynamic, dry farm, so no water, which is very rare for Zinfandel, because Zinfandel is tough to manage. It's even more thin-skinned and more delicate than Pinot Noir. And it's usually, fairly large berries, but from this vineyard, it's Howell Mountain and it's dry farm, so we get tiny berries. But I used to bug Jerry every time I'd see him and say, hey, Rick, or I wouldn't say, hey, Rick, I'd say, hey, Jerry, can I get 5 tons of that? Can I get 4 tons? Is there some way I can get some? And he'd say, who are you? And I'd be like, I'm your neighbor, man. It's Elton. Come on, brother. Robert Craig, give me some fruit. So finally he said, well, I've got some jackass that wants me to get it all ripe every year, and then it falls apart. Then you didn't want to pay. I was like, whatever. I'll take whatever section we can get. So we ended up getting our first fruit in 2006. And I'll say to you this, Rick, that the 2006 Zinfandel, I saved very little of it in the library. Humongous mistake, because now that wine, if my mom were to sneak up behind me and, I had a full glass in my hand and try and get it away from me, she would just get knocked down. That 06 Black Sears is astounding. And it's now, 14 years old, and it's still so young and vibrant. So you can see this 15 is now 5 years old, and it's just starting to really show itself. Instead of the primary fruit, it's starting to show that gorgeous ground white pepper, that spice. And ordinarily, I would serve the Zinfandel last after every other Cabernet that we did, because even though it's lighter, the fruit profile can be so profoundly different that it can really, it can really mess with the Cabernets. But we're going to do a little intermezzo with Merlot. The Merlot is humongous, and then go to Cabernet. So I'm starting with Zin, and cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Hey, so Elton, while everyone's taking a sip, is there anything stylistically different that you do with the Zins versus your Merlot or your Cabernet, or do you try to imprint the the Robert Craig DNA in all your varietals?
Well, those are great questions, and two, really pointed questions about what is wine style. We use the same Robert Craig DNA for all the wines. When I arrived in 2004, our wines were much riper at that time. I think our average Brix at harvest was over 31 degrees, whereas now we're in the mid 24s. So I like wines that are super classic and super structured and are able to show, the vineyard site in the wine. And so really since 2005, the wines have been more ageable, more cellar worthy, a little less approachable on release. Like these 15s were super angry and coiled when they were released. And I think that's why, when Galoni and My Bete Noir, Lisa Peretti Brown, were that took over for Robert Parker. All these guys are tasting some of these wines, and they didn't give them the best reviews. Not our wine, but I'm saying the vintage in general in Napa Valley. You know, our wines ended up receiving great scores from a number of people, but, you know, just lower than the 14s, which to me was ridiculous considering the quality of the 15 vintage. So it's the nature of Robert Craig wine to allow the vintage to speak. We're not going to micro-oxygenate or get the wines any riper or do like an ultra extended maceration or, you know, God forbid, add mega purple into anything to try and get the wines to loosen up. So number one, that's the Craig style. And number two, to your point, with the Cabernets, with Zinfandel, with Chardonnay, some wineries say, well, we make all of these Cabernets that we produce exactly in the same manner so that you can see the differences. And to me, that's a ridiculous thing to do. I think like Chris Carpenter at La Colla really had a nice note with Galoni. We do the same thing in that, you know, each one of our Cabernets likes a different wood. You know, Vitre loves Terenceau, Howell Mountain loves Darnajou barrels, and each wine has its own. If you get the fermentation temperature too high on Howell Mountain, the wines just become really astringent. So it takes a long, cool fermentation. All of the wines need their own thing. And with the Zinfandel, the last thing I wanted to do is produce a Zinfandel that was, you know, like American oak, over the top. It tasted like raisins and prunes and is just one big ball of jam. So this thing is really, the reason it's in the Burgundy bottle is because or I call it a Rhone bottle, is because people get fooled all the time by this in brown bag tastings and thinks that this is like, you know, Baccarat or San Josef or Gigondas or something like that. And that's why it's in different glass. It's a totally different program than the Cabernets.
Well, I can say, Eldon, when I'm tasting this, I had a certain expectation of Zins, you know, either being just too alcoholic or too jammy, and also Howell Mountain being, you know, very structured. Maybe it'll be on the other side of just being, you know, too, you know, tannic and tight. But this is very approachable and almost, like a Pinot-like, you know, in its mouthfeel. So I'm really liking this. And I've got a question from Robert. And so Robert was asking the pepper, you know, characteristics, you know, from Black Sears. Where does it come from? The soil, you know, the vines, climate?
It really comes from the ground white pepper, that exotic spice that's in this wine every year. Like a lot of Zinfandels feature like a super heavy black pepper. This wine has this sort of ground, really high-toned, sweet herb and pepper. It's a spicy component to it that is purely Black Sears. All the wines that we taste from Black Sears, from back when Larry Turley made wine from there way back in the day and actually made the vineyard famous. The people that are making wine out of that vineyard produce extraordinary wine. And even though, you know, Larry Turley always loved the wine a lot riper, that same thread runs through the wine. And for me, in particular, in a drought year, you get a tremendous amount of that quality. And it's so cool to taste this wine 5 years in, and it's gaining weight and gaining flesh. When it started out, it was really tight, and everybody in the office, I think some of my Craig crew are on here because Lord knows they're all just pretending to work anyway. I'm keeping you all on board. I need commentary. But when it first came out, we tasted this and thought, oh shit, you know, when are people going to have to open this? Is this all there is to it? And now this, I mean, what a glorious glass of wine. And I think in 5 more years' time, for the people that can wait, that 10 years after vintage date for the Zinfandel seems to be like bullseye. But like I said, the 06 is 14 years in, and it's not slowing down at all.
And so, Eldon, I got a question from Doug Cannon, wondering what would you pair with this Zin?
Oh my goodness. Well, looking at what we're eating here on lockdown, we've made a lot of Rancho Gordo beans lately. You know, the thing about our Zinfandel is it's not so heavy-handed. So it does go well with grilled meats. It goes really well with, I mean, you could put a steak on the grill, but to me, what's interesting about this wine is a lot of times we'll take some wild salmon, put it in a plastic bag with some green aggressive olive oil and some cracked peppercorns and some rosemary and sea salt and shake it all around and throw it on the grill. And this wine is not so big that it will kill the salmon. So if it's even a hearty grilled fish, it works beautifully with winter dishes like, cassoulet, sausages, ribs. It's amazing. And really quickly, I saw the Curleys came on from their bunker. Hey, Curleys, rock and roll, man. I love you guys. Sorry, guys, I'm so engaged in blabbing about our wine. I haven't had much time to go to Q&A. So we'll get Tilden to take a pause and answer some questions. But I hope you're enjoying this.
So we have a question from, let's see, Jan. I'm going to butcher names. I apologize. So Johnny Tamarino, how old are the vines at Black Sears Vineyard generally?
Great question. You could see from that photo I put up that those babies are no spring chickens. So most of the vineyard was, in our section of the vineyard, was planted in 1975. So whatever 75 minus 2020 is, they are, or 2020 minus 1975 is 45-year-old vines. I can't believe I can't make Robert Craig Winery profitable. This higher math is too much for me, Tilden. Yeah, so the vines are 45 years old. They look beautiful. Like I said, Pete Richmond and Silverado Farming. I mean, when you go in there, it all looks like a head train mess. But then you start noticing, wow, every single cane has exactly the same 21 leaves on it. All the fruit is perfectly positioned in filtered light. I mean, it really is. If you ever come up to our place and get a chance to go 100 yards, north of our gate in Black Sears Vineyard, it is one of the most spectacular vineyard sites. And they just tore out a huge portion of this Zinfandel. We did a filming for the BBC up there, and they were doing, a piece on the disappearing Zinfandel vineyards, mountain Zinfandel vineyards in America. And I'm like, well, you might want to turn the camera this way so we don't have all these vines that are torn up and replanted to Cabernet, because they get $180 a bottle for their Cabernet and they get $80 a bottle for the Zinfandel. So what do you think has to go? So that's a shame. So all of you guys, we got the fruit in 2019, but starting next year, you're going to have to bring a note from your mother and give KC or Christian or Jamie a nice shoulder massage to get an allocation of the Zinfandel. It's a disappearing beast, but this 15, oh my goodness, what a wine this is. I hope I've tasted this forever.
No, I'm very impressed with this 2015. I really am. And I didn't realize that in the late 1800s that the most planted vine in Napa Valley was Zinfandel. And correct me if I'm wrong, Eldon, I think now among all the valley floor and mountain AVAs, Zin is most planted in Howell Mountain as opposed to any other AVAs within Napa, or?
I believe so, because Howell Mountain's been, what you have up there is you have right next door, this thin sliver in between Black Sears and us. You have Larry Turley's. He has his Dragon Vineyard and his Rattlesnake Ridge on either side of the road right next to us. Then you go into Black Sears. Right before that, you have Lambourne right before you get to our property, which is Heidi Barrett. If you guys haven't had Lambourne wines, they're spectacular. I love those wines. Then you have Outpost, which is Thomas Rivers Brown. So again, it's, riper than my style, but the wines are phenomenal quality, and they make great Zinfandel. So as you kind of look on that summit stretch of Howell Mountain, one of the great areas for Zinfandel anywhere in the world. And I think of Black Sears, like there's Lytton Springs and Geyserville from Ridge. There's the Monterosso Vineyard on Moon Mountain. There's Hain. There's Tofanelli Vineyard, Jackass Vineyard in the Russian River. But I mean, in my mind, Black Sears, the highest elevation, the way that's farmed, there's nothing else like it. And I'm just honored to be able to produce a wine. So ordinarily, I would never show something from a vineyard we didn't own. But you know, here we are. It's just a hell of a wine.
Well,
So
and I
anybody
didn't,
that doesn't
and I-
like it, remain silent.
and then I didn't realize that it was actually 100 feet in elevation above your property. So in the wintertime, you must have these incredibly beautiful snow-covered vineyards up there from time to time.
Yes, we do. And that's what we have a photograph, we have a blown up photograph in our tasting salon in downtown Napa of, because we get snow 3 or 4 times a year. And I know Jason and Connor, I think are watching this with KC. KC's been taken out of the tasting room and he's racking barrels right now. So we can keep getting that paycheck. And I think it's going to snow up there tomorrow night. You
Wow.
know?
Okay, so Elton, one last question before we go on to the next wine. We got a question from, let's see, give me a sec. I'll just ask the question and I'll tell you who it's from. But basically the question was whether it's 100% Zin or whether you have any other varietals mixed in,
Yes.
as well as the
another-
oak, as well as the oak treatment.
Yeah, okay. Excellent question. So this Zinfandel, we get a section of the vineyard, and just looking at the leaves, you know, you have to be like ultra expert to know. I do not know what the difference in the leaves are to mean. We know it's a different, you can see it's a different variety. It's probably some sort of Petite Syrah or Pleurissin or something like that. So there is something else in the Zinfandel from that section. It's not all the same. And that's probably just what happened when they got the cuttings from the nursery or whatever back in the day. But I mean, this wine, I just want it to remain pure. So it's as much Zinfandel. It comes from that block. We don't have to do a thing to it. It's amazing. And the second thing is, you know, when I started at Craig, we were making an Amador County Zinfandel, which I couldn't figure that out. Like, we need to make something from the Sierra foothills that takes 10 hours to get up to the winery. And we're not even in the Zinfandel business. And that we put on American oak. But this wine is pure French oak beauty. I mean, we use I can't remember, I think we use a Baron barrel. We use a very expensive French oak barrel that is often used for producing a Pinot Noir, because it has a gorgeous spice and it's not too heavy-handed.
And so the question regarding the oak treatment was from Dan O'Connor. And regarding the varietal, it was Austin.
All right. Hey, guys, thanks so much for chiming in.
Yeah. And then, you know, maybe we can fit in one last question before we go to the next wine. So
Yeah.
typically, what bricks do you pick the Zins at?
So the Zin is
And that's from
really, it's the Zin, you know, we shoot for anywhere from 24.5 to 26.5 on that. But the Zinfandel, if it gets hot and the fruit starts to bag because there's no irrigation on that section, the Zinfandel, the bricks, you know, we always err on the low side to have the fruit intact. So one of the things that you pay for, sometimes it'll in cooler vintages, or in vintages, if it gets like super hot and we have to pick it so the fruit holds up, you can get a little bit of a vegetal character, but it's just the nature of that vineyard. It's like old school Napa Valley. So we label all of the wines at 14.8 alcohol because I don't want to mess with having to change the labels every year, but they're almost all lower than that. The Zinfandel is usually 14.2, 14.3, and no residual sweetness in Robert Craig wines. That drives me nuts. I don't like sugar in my wine. So we ferment everything out totally dry.
Okay, so I'm gonna, finish the Zin, and I think we should go to the next wine.
I think so. It's Merlot Mofo o'clock. Well, fine. Let me pull up that vineyard.
Okay. Okay, here's the 2015 Merlot.
All right.
And then Eldon, I'm looking at the back of the bottle and it says that you folks are Napa Green certified. What, can you explain to folks what that means?
So Napa Green certification, it has been a tremendous offering from the Napa Valley Vintners to where we don't have to get certified every step of the way on the erosion control plan. So it involves a huge number of green initiatives in the vineyard, from everything how you rotate your cover crop, you're not allowed to disc, you have to recycle your water. It is a gargantuan chore to get a Napa Green certification. And we have it in the winery and in the vineyard. I'm very proud of that. You know, I wish I could reach down to the grave sometimes and strangle Bob for not giving us a cave or putting in solar. But, you know, one thing at a time. All you guys have to do is each buy 75 more of these 3-packs, and I'll be able to get solar panels on the roof of that damn winery. But Napa Green is something that we take very seriously. We are actually going to move our Howell Mountain properties into biodynamic, and we're farming Mount Veeder totally organic for the first time this year, but we've never put any crap into the soil or into the grapes. It's just something that you cannot do anything to your soil that's unnatural and expect your vineyard to be managed well. So let me show you where this Merlot comes from. This is if you're driving up the lane to the winery. The Merlot is like in that section right there as you're you know, driving up towards the winery when you come in the gate. And it's just a great block that I finally got tired of blending all of it. In all of our brown bag tastings, the Merlot would show up as something completely unlike any of the other lots. And you know, we're not in the Merlot business because in the end, we have to make money at Robert Craig, pay the employees and the bank, and Dan Allred, the bank. But I love that wine. I love Chateau Petrus. I love, you know, Vieux Chateau Certain. I love Pavie. I love all of these wines from the right bank in Bordeaux. And one of my favorite wines that I used to distribute was Bancroft Ranch, Beringer's Bancroft Ranch Howell Mountain Merlot, which in our tasting group that includes master sommeliers, you know, we did 1995 France versus California and 2005 France versus California, Bordeaux versus California. The winner of both flights, Bancroft Ranch, Beringer, Howell Mountain Merlot, 95 and 2005. So after that, I said, man, we got to make some Merlot here because I just love this wine. So this is not a wine for the faint of heart, that's for sure. It is, I think back in the day, most of our customers got their first introduction to Merlot in the 13 vintage when we didn't have enough to send out for the wine club release. And so we sent an email. People rarely read email anymore to say, hey, we're going to put 2013 Howell Mountain Merlot in because it's the same price. And all these people got a flood of emails saying, oh my God, Rachel, you know, why did you send us Merlot? And as it turns out, you know, Rachel, as she is, said, well, why don't you try it? If you don't like it, we'll take it back. And then we got all these phone calls with these people saying, how do I get more of this Merlot? How do I get more of this Merlot? So it turned out to be, I think, the best thing for the introduction. We make now just 250 to 300 cases of the wine. 15, I made a little bit more. I made like 500 or 600 cases because we had just purchased Candlestick Vineyard, a lot of Merlot, but it is astounding wine. And this is another wine that was so stiff when it first came out, but it's blossoming now.
So Eldon, so I'm glad you mentioned Right Bank Bordeaux. So of course, Right Bank Bordeaux is, you know, it's mostly clay limestone, you know, very flat. And, you know, the blend is typically, you know, like 80-ish% Merlot and 20%, you know, some other varietals, including Cabernet Franc. And so question to you is, you know, with the higher...
Let me feed the kitty cat.
Sure. So with the higher elevation and different soils, you know, in which you grow your Merlot, how does that translate into the taste difference? And I'm also responding to a question as to what the blend is for the Merlot.
Great questions again. So Tilden, no wonder you're successful at deposing people. So the Merlot, I mean, for us, I love right bank Merlot. So the right side of the Gironde in Bordeaux, France, which is Saint-Emilion and Pomerol, for those people that aren't total wine geeks, produces Chateau Petrus, Le Pen, some of the most expensive Bordeaux variety wine in the world. And to me, California is never going to be that. You know, California is going to produce California wine, but it doesn't mean that we have to produce fat, overripe, over-alcoholic, understructured clodhoppers that really don't improve with time. And so for me, I'm like, we're going to make a wine that features this property. And the cool thing about the Merlot, and I give kudos to Jason Price, who's been working with us, our winemaker that took over for Stephen when Stephen left to tend to his family in Tahoe this year. But Jason's been with us for 6 years, and he's always had a great touch with the Merlot. Is it displays Howell Mountain so well. And in California, it's frankly a little bit too warm for Merlot. In France, they're on a gravel bed with they have a soil that retains a little bit more water, as you mentioned, clay limestone. Whereas on Howell Mountain, it is pure white volcanic tufa or a red basalt series soil with very high iron content that also produces great wine. I'll show you a little photograph of the soil from Candlestick where we make the Merlot. Is absolutely fascinating. That it's a picture tells is better than 1,000 words sometimes. So I don't know if you all can see those white rocks going down the lane when we rip that vineyard. It's these huge volcanic rocks, and Merlot loves that. If it gets too hot though, it will shut down, and the Merlot will never get that phenolic ripeness that gives you that flavor and that complexity. But this, you know, when I go out to wine lists, all of us that are savvy in the industry, we rarely order, I shouldn't even say this to this group of people, but Napa Valley Cabernet, if you're in a steakhouse, to even get something interesting, you start at $300, $350 unless you're buying affinity, which is, that's why we sell so much of it. So all of us look for, we look in the Rhone, you look in Northern Italy on the wine list, and then you can look and get tremendous, tremendous quality California Merlot for, so much less money than Cabernet Sauvignon. But really, some people try to make kind of a lightened up version of Merlot to be more consumer friendly, but we don't do that. I mean, this thing is made to age for 30 to 40 years.
So I'm struck by the broad mid palate that I usually get from Merlot, but it certainly has, the structure that I would expect from a Robert Craig modern grown fruit. And I apologize if I was mid-sip and I didn't hear, but what other varietals go into this Merlot blend, and what is the oak treatment?
Nope, I failed to answer that while I was blathering on. So the other variety is predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon, about 10%. And then there's usually like 2 to 3% in Petit Verdot and Malbec, just to help unlock. The Cabernet, it's interesting, helps to bring out the perfume of the Merlot more. So you would think the Cabernet would make the wine harder, but it actually makes the wine a little bit more voluptuous, which I always find interesting. This is really a stiff, big tannin count wine. I mean, if you look at Napa Valley Cabernets in general, Chateau Lafite, if you're in a lab, is about 1,300 parts per million tannin. Most Napa Cabernets are in that 1280 to 1350 range. The Merlot is like 1,400 something ppm tannin. So it's a very coiled tannic wine, but has this gorgeous mouthfeel. I mean, I'm thrilled with this wine. Merlot is one of those ones with, when we taste our 14, our 13, the 16 to me is a little more approachable even, and it's a great vintage for Merlot. Than this 15 has just remained angry for a long time.
So I've got a question from the Dallas RC Wine Club, and I'm wondering, are you gonna produce more Merlot since you like it so much, or are you restricted by your vineyard and the production?
Well, we could produce quite a bit. I sell a good bit of Merlot from our Candlestick property. It used to go into Duckhorns. We bought the Candlestick vineyard from Duckhorn in 2015. and they made a Merlot-based wine called The Discussion for $140 out of there. That was Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Syrah. For me, it's a little more Merlot than I would like. I don't want to be in the Merlot business. I'd rather have it be something where, you know, we make a couple hundred cases, we sell out in 6 months, and I don't have to worry about it. But I mean, even Schaefer got out of the Merlot business after all these years of making really fine Merlot. But Merlot on the valley floor, I mean, it's getting so hot with global warming down there. It's been very difficult for those guys to, oh, if he wants to come up, he can. My cat is dying to get up here and start messing around on my keyboard. But at any rate, so for the answer to that question is, it's always going to be around 300 cases. If they want to commit to buy 500 cases, I'll make it. Thank you,
Well,
Dallas Wine Club.
And you're going to have to increase the yield, which is really hard to do. And one of the other things that you already mentioned, but I saw on the label is, and it's a very informative back label, is 1.8 tons per acre yield. And for me, when I think of low yield, I think of, like, let's say Priorat, where the yield is just like crazy low, like 0.5 tons per acre. But to put things in perspective, in Napa Valley, and 1.8 tons per acre is pretty low, isn't it?
Oh, that's in the lowest, 0.5% of all the valley. I mean, lower than that. I actually in the coming years, we're doing a lot of cane pruning so that we have some of these vines that are stronger carry a little bit more fruit. Some of the vines that are weaker carry a little bit less fruit. So it just means more haircuts at pruning time, more labor cost at pruning. But the idea is the vine, would be a little bit healthier, maybe at 2.5 tons, 3 tons an acre even. But there's no way on Howell Mountain, if I fertilized it all year long and ran the water all day, every day, there's no way that we would get 5 tons an acre up there. I mean, in the super low year was 2015 was a very low yield year. And on Howell Mountain, we averaged 1 ton per acre in 2015. So it's a great year to purchase from Howell Mountain just because the wines all taste like the stones from up there.
What is the price delta between your Merlot and your Estate Cabernet Sauvignon?
Well, I wanted to price the Merlot at the exact same price as the Howell Mountain Cabernet, $110 a bottle. But you all can thank Rachel Miller for getting a bargain. She was always concerned about, she would get it for half price, of course, employee price, but she would get it for half price. So I relented. I ascended to $90, and that's where we are. So it's a great buy for what it's expensive for Merlot. I understand that, but in terms of having it hand farmed by Pete Richmond, the best in the business, and then the kind of wine that it produces, the kind of ageability this wine is going to have, I think all of the people that buy it now, it's really starting to unlock. I mean, this wine just tastes brilliant to me. And I just can't wait to see it in another 5 years when it's going full throttle at the 10-year mark. But I think this wine's going to be, seller for up to 30 years.
And we have a question from Keith Bentley. So you mentioned there's still some 2015 available, but just the 750s, or are there large formats still available?
We made very few large formats of this wine. I think they're all gone. I'm going to bottle some more 3 liters because as the Merlot program has gone, I have been blown away by how much we're all liking, like the 13 wine, the 14 wine. And like I said, I think 15 is a superior vintage to both of those. So 13 was our first. But Keith, get a hold of Jamie Castro. I'm gonna mark your name down here in a note, and we can check the library. But we have very limited amount of 13 and 14 available. We do a 7-year and a 10-year library release. So the 13 is actually available this year. But I know we have a tiny amount because all of the people that got it for their wine club just freaked out, and we sold a huge amount. So I never keep enough library back, but that's because I always need the money. If we have the wine and somebody has cash, I'm like, here you go.
And so, before we go to the next wine, I know people are really looking forward to the Cabernet Sauvignon. I want to give you, Elton, an opportunity to inject a little levity and humor. So I've got a question from Joe Barwick that if you were
Beer man.
if you're a grape variety or varietal, what would you be reincarnated as?
Well, I think for sure I would be Nebbiolo. That's where I've ended up in my wine journey, where I might seem light and inconsequential at first, but as you get to know me, I think I'll stand the test of time. So Joe, that's a great question. Everything begins and ends, in with Northern Italy with me. Bless those people and what they're going through, but I think we're going to be in a similar situation in short order. But I absolutely love Barolo and Barbaresco and the wines of Piedmont. All of us travel the circuit, and of course, I love Napa Cabernet. I mean, the more I get to know it, the more proud I am of what we have here is so special. These ageable, spectacular wines that are beyond Bordeaux, and in many cases, do not, they don't make you take out a second mortgage on your house. To be able to buy wines like this that will stand the test of time with anybody's wine is a great honor. I think of, obviously we're going to taste some older Vitre later, but I think of that now being $350 from the folks at Ponte Canet for the same vineyard that we used to make our Vitre for 22 years from. And there you go. I'm off my soapbox. So we're running out of time, Tilden. We got to get to Cabernet.
Let's go to Cabernet.
So
there's a Cabernet. So Eldon, what is the blend in the Cabernet?
So the blend in the Cabernet, this is always about 80% Cab. It always has Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. And now with the Candlestick property, we have tremendous Malbec and Petit Verdot growing from the replant. And it's just about as dark as my soul. So I'm really looking forward to the coming years with Pete Richmond farming this place. We should make this astounding wine.
And do you have just a field blend of different clones, or do you have a particular set of clones for your Cabernet Sauvignon on your?
We have a particular set of clones for the Cabernet Sauvignon. So we have a lot of clone 4, a lot of clone 6, 337 up there, and then there's a couple that I'd have to look at my notes for. But it was that vineyard was actually planted by Walsh, had that half in 2015. And so now it's just coming online, is producing astounding fruit, to have all clean rootstock planted in the correct orientation. Because most of our vineyards up there were planted between 95 and 97. And at that time, the guy that planted it was Alex Ryan, who's the CEO of Duckhorn. He planted our winery property and used to live in the house there before Bob bought it. And then he also planted the Candlestick vineyard that we ended up buying from Duckhorn. So, and that was right before, now the vineyard's doubled in value. There's no way we could even touch anything else. So we literally got in as the scythe fell on anything within reason in the Napa Valley, unless you're a billionaire or an insurance company, like the folks that bought Outpost recently. So here we are, 2015, this wine, oh my God, when I sat down with Stephen Tebb, who was the winemaker for this wine, and Antonio Galloni, and Keith Emerson, our consulting winemaker, is since 2005, who's incredibly talented, makes all the wine at Vineyard 29. We sat down with Antonio, and he just, oh my God, he just did not like this wine. And it was so stiff. I just thought, why in the F are you out here tasting these wines in October when we bottle, in August, and it's totally bottle shocked. But of course, I didn't bring that up to him. But this wine is such a tremendous wine. He still gave it I think it was like 93 points or something, but the fact that the 14 was 95 and this is 93 just blows my mind, because this is a hell of a glass of wine.
Well, you'd mentioned it was close. Right now, the aromas are just bursting out of this glass. So
if only you had the Riedel Tyrol. Just throw it in the dishwasher. The stem's so short. It's also a great gin and tonic glass.
I'm daring. Yeah, I have one of those skinny stem Gabriel glass, gold edition. So.
Well, we're coming down the home stretch.
Yes.
But
so Eldon, I'm sure most of the Craigers know that you have single mountain AVA Cabernets, and I was wondering if you could go through, just some of the generalized differences in the flavor profile between the different Mountain AVA cabs that you release.
Sure. I mean, Howell Mountain and Affinity are both grown on the east side of the valley in the Vaca Range, and that range was formed by the earthquakes that formed the Sierra Mountain Range. And so it was all this spewing lava from the formation of the Sierras. So a lot of people, for instance, think that Mount St. Helena is a dormant volcano, but it's actually just a huge volcanic rock. So I even hear winemakers talk about that as a volcano, but it's not. It's a volcanic rock. And that's what formed Howell Mountain, Pritchard Hill, Affinity. That side of the valley, I say, is the violin. These very high nervous notes in the wines. The wines are tightly wound, a little more knees and elbows, a little more high toned. Whereas the wines on the west side, we make from south to north, it goes Mount Veeder, Spring Mountain, and then Diamond Mountain in a row. On the west side of the valley in the Mayacamas range, that was pushed up from the ocean floor by earthquake, relatively very young mountain range, about 5.5 million years ago. To give you an idea, like the Blue Ridge Mountains are 22 million years old, one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world. And that was pushed up. So you have this fossilized marine sediment. It's almost like the White Cliffs of Dover or what Champagne is growing on. It's this real chalky white shale sandstone soil with a very thin topsoil and serpentine rock underneath. And those wines to me, like the Veeder, reminds me of Saint Julien in Bordeaux, where it's always big fruit, humongous power, but also great acidity, very low pHs for California wines. Spring Mountain comes up next, is the next mountain. That's a slightly different soil structure for that side. You have this sort of higher water holding capacity in the clay, and a little more clay in the soil. And the wine always has this sweet conifer forest floor, mountain violet, this really exotic perfume. And it tends to be a little more elegant than our other mountain Cabernets. And then Diamond Mountain, which is as wound up as anything. That's just a big, powerful wine. It's like Mount Veeder with a little Howell Mountain thrown in. But to me, everybody always thinks your highest priced wine is your best, but our highest priced wine is our Diamond Mountain because we have to buy that fruit from Peter Thompson, who owns Andrew Jeffrey Vineyard, and the rest of that goes into La Jolla and Cardinal. So our price is crazy on that fruit, and I hate to give it up, but I think Howell Mountain is our best wine, but we don't, so the price is not in accordance with necessarily with quality. It's what we have to pay to buy that very rare fruit. But I think if I have one child to save from the raging waters, it is Howell Mountain Cabernet at Robert Craig. Oh my God, everybody in Sausalito at 8 o'clock every night is going outside and howling. So it's freaking our cat out, but I feel like howling when I have this wine.
Gorgeous aromas bursting out of the glass. I was expecting more tannins, but and bite, but you're right. It's really calmed down and it's in a very good place right now. What do you think would be the longevity of this and the drink range?
So
obviously right now is a great time, but
I think we're just entering where it's showing the vineyard and it's not so primary. I mean, usually the 5-year mark, the 6-year mark for our wines, you start to show the vineyard quality in the wine. But to me, this wine is really going to be showing 10 to 15 years after vintage date, and it's going to hold for 30 to 45 years after vintage date. I mean, this is going to be a long-lived wine. The tannins are very, very round, but they are huge. If you hold this thing in your mouth for a minute, it will suck the moisture straight out of your face. But Howell Mountain tannins are very round because you have that long ripening curve, and you get this non-photosynthetic ripening, this lignification at night with the seeds and the stems, and so it's not photosynthetic ripening where you have an increase in sugar, which means an increase in alcohol when you ferment it out. You have this beautiful at night. You're above the layer, so it stays warmer, and you get this continual ripening. So even though these mountain wines have this huge tannin, they have this tremendous suppleness on Howell Mountain, and that's really a hallmark of the AVA.
So Eldon, obviously a good choice would be a steak with this, but what are some of the other pairings that you would say, think outside the box and enjoy with this?
Well, I think the best pairing for a Howell Mountain wine is always the navel of a loved one, but I would say Tilden, to me, steak, hearty pastas, ribs, food. I mean, I believe in the Richard Olney view of the world, where the more complex the wine, the more simple the dish. One of the dishes that Shelley and I cook at home, and we absolutely love with this wine, is pot roast. I mean, oh my gosh, you cook a beef shoulder all day long with potatoes and carrots and celery. Oh my gosh, with this wine, it is mind blowing. Put a bottle of red wine in there and let it cook down for 4 or 5 hours. It is absolutely mind blowing. But Howell Mountain is, as the Italians would say, vino di meditazione. It is wine just to think about and have a book with. Some of my best first experiences in all of wine when I was selling it on the street were selling those great wines from Lahota back in the day in Indianapolis. I would take it out. This was way before, I think Kendall Jackson purchased Lahota in the early 2000s, but this was back, I mean, I was selling like the 85 and 86 vintage, and people would taste the wine and just say, oh my God, this is something very different. And I would say, yes, it's Howell Mountain. So it's a full circle that I've come here to be able to actually represent and grow this wine and produce it and try and pay Dan's bank whenever possible for it.
And Eldon, I was flipping around the back of the bottles because I was feeling a question that I saw much earlier when we're on this program, but I couldn't find an appropriate time, but I think this is the appropriate time. All three of your 2015s are 14.8% ABV. And the question was that by accident or purpose, or, how does it get to 14.8? Is that just the perfect phenolic combination of what it got to get to phenolic ripeness for picking these wines?
Tilden, that is pure compliance laziness on my part. As I mentioned earlier, we label all the wines at 14.8. If you look back to every Robert Craig wine for the last 15 years since I've been there, I'm like, I am not changing this effing label every year. And so they're always 14.8, 14.8, 14.8. And the Chardonnay actually is barely 13%. And it's labeled, hopefully nobody here works for the BATF that's viewing this. You're allowed like 1.5% fudge, but the Chardonnay
what is the plus and minus fudge? Like 0.5%?
It's like 1.5%.
Wow, 1.5%. You can.
I know my winemaker's probably cringing right now. Jason's probably getting ready to chew his hat, but
no, I think Craigers and wine enthusiasts really want to know that detail about that variation, just because.
You can go to the tasting notes online. There's a section called Trade, and it'll have tasting notes on all of the wines, and just go in there if you want to geek out on the alcohol. But these wines are almost all lower than 14.8, to give you an idea. I mean, we are about 0.5% under that. They're in the low 14s. Since I took over the management of the winery in 2004, 2005, starting in the 05 vintage, all the wines have been lower in alcohol because I like super classic wines. And I'm the guy that has to, pay the mortgage in this joint. So that's what we do at Craig. They're very, very classic. But this wine, I got to say, I'm tasting these 15s myself. Jamie, thank you, Jamie Castro, who worked so hard to get everybody their wine. This is with FedEx and our fulfillment house down to Skeleton Cruise. It was incredible that everybody received their wine except for James Phillips. I'm sorry, James. But I just have to say it was great. So much better than Styrofoam receiving it. All the wines are in great shape. And this 15 Cabernet, I haven't tasted these 15s in a while because it's too young for me to be tasting for a library release, and too old. We've been on 16 and now starting to sell 17. So these 15s, I have to say, are rocking my world.
So Elton, I actually opened these bottles and just did a slight decant about 2 hours ago, just in the bottle. What would be your recommendation for decanting these wines to drink now?
Yeah, everything, up to 10 years old and including 10 years, if you can do an hour decant and don't put it in a dusty old decanter, put it in just a water pitcher or something you use all the time, nothing that has any dust or debris in it. So if you use your decanter all the time and wash it out with hot water, great. But so many people pour these wines into a dusty decanter, then the wines taste dusty and like, it's like glasses
Not
from
like
cabinet.
Rutherford dust, bad dust.
Yes, exactly. So the decanting time, I saw so much great stuff on Instagram. Let's Tilden, what I want to hear from you now that we're having this, or give me 2 or 3 restaurants that you absolutely love in Los Angeles. I mean, when we met back in the day, you couldn't get arrested in a good restaurant in LA. And now there are so many places that open up. You turn me on to the place in Koreatown that we had our own room. That was one of the great wine experiences ever. I think Rachel was there for that. Jamie, you're next. We're going to get you where the Tilden effect hashtag is going to be fully involved.
Well, yeah, as you probably know, or maybe you don't. So I'm a first generation Korean, and so frugality is in my blood. I was literally born in a hut. So I like to go to restaurants, that have minimal corkage and great service and food. And so those are the restaurants that I focus on. And so whenever you come down here, I try to take you to places that aren't what you would find up in Northern California. So I'm glad you enjoyed the Korean Royal Cuisine restaurant that we took you to.
It was amazing.
Yes.
It was
Okay,
amazing.
so we're getting close to the end, and I know we had a bonus tasting, and I'd like to go to the bonus tasting because we have a 2010 Mount Veeder, and it's great that we're gonna bonus taste this because you have some amazing stories about Mount Veeder and that property. And I was wondering if you could tell everyone who the owner was, and you told me some great anecdotes of your interaction with the owner, and who the current owner is, and why, if you can get back vintages of Mount Veeder, why it's such a great deal.
Tilden, I love you. That's like a softball layup. Well, to everybody out there, I'd like to say thank you so much for following along. I hope you enjoyed the wines as much as I did. Since we're on lockdown and I don't have anything to do tomorrow, Shelly and I are probably going to drink all of these tonight and then fight over what movie we're going to watch on Netflix. But here is the wine that we're having. I asked Jamie to ship Tilden and I something older. We didn't have any Howell Mountain in the fulfillment house, so we shipped a little Mount Veeder from Pymrae Vineyard. Pymrae, Pymrae. That happens to be the 2 middle names of Robin's Robin Williams, 2 firstborn children. And the property, after 22 vintages of Robert Craig from 1993 to 2015, was purchased by the folks at Chateau Pontet Canet, the Tesseron family, Alfred Tesseron of the Tesseron Cognac fortune, but he also has Pontet Canet, Chateau Pontet Canet, receiving 2 perfect scores from Parker, the Robert Parker, in the 09 and the 10 vintage consecutively. But amazing wine, collected Pontet Canet for years. But this 2010 Veeder, I wanted us to do something that was 10 years old and just kind of wow Tilden, thank him for being our moderator today. If you guys get a chance, go check him out on Instagram at Terroir Matters. Just really wonderful wine page. Tilden drinks better than I do, unfortunately. I need to amend that. But what a wine. I think Jamie told me we only have 2 cases of this. So if anybody wants some, it's going fast. But I thought we'd finish with 10 years. And here's my toast to all of you out there. Thank you for your support. This is huge for us. Please give me unfiltered commentary, elton@robertcraigwine.com. Shelly, Toonces, we all appreciate your love and support, and I wish all of you and your families very well through this time. This has really been just a tough time, but the best part has been the wine community coming together and being able to at least connect virtually. We'll do these smaller where we can all get on screen, but gosh, we have, you know, 165 people or whatever that came on board. There's just no way to get everybody onto a screen and talk.
Yeah, so there were other comments from people wondering when the next virtual tasting will be. So please, thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to the next one.
Tilden, I love you, man. We're going to announce the next one at the start of next week. We're going to work, I think, maybe do a vertical of Spring Mountain to feature a wine that we don't often do, but oh my goodness, thank you all for joining along. And I look forward to seeing any of the social media posts. So to Phil Koo, who does our social media, who's awesome, to Jamie and Christian, who have fulfilled all these orders, to the whole Craig staff. You guys have been great. We're keeping everybody employed. How about that? Jackson family laying off 90% of their employees, and I guarantee you he has a little more money than Robert Craig does. So you can come down and see one of my guitar performances, and just please clean your coins with bleach before you throw them in my open guitar case.
And if folks like the 2015, you still have some 3-packs available, right?
We do. So Jamie just moved some wine out of the library into our fulfillment house. We have the same deal. If you guys want some more of these 15, the 3-packs are still available. It's amazing wine. And I put a big library in the back because I'm like, these need time, end of story. And tasting these wines tonight, Tilden, I'm just, what can I say? But I love Howell Mountain. However, 2010 Pimrays tasted pretty good too, and it's $100 a bottle, and not $350 is what the Tesserons are charging for theirs that just came out.
I was waiting for that. Good.
$350, man. So
I gave you a softball, you hit a home run. So
that's right. Thank you, brother.
All right.
Love you, Tilden. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
I'll try and if anybody wants to have anything further answered, email me, shoot me a note on Instagram, and I'll see if I can't get this done. Tilden.
Right.
I love you, man. Thanks for hosting with me.
Stay well, everyone.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.